He stood still in front of the city hall steps, the winter wind brushing against his face as cameras flashed in short, triumphant bursts. Jalen Carter had just won. Not in a game, not in a courtroom, but in a competition he wasn't meant to win. The city's architectural redevelopment contest was supposed to be symbolic, a gesture of inclusion, a checkbox. But his design for Unity Row, a vibrant, green, affordable housing complex to replace the decaying blocks of South End, stunned the jury. His name was announced on a Tuesday afternoon. A black man from the same neighborhood he was now entrusted to rebuild. For the first time in a long time, the city seemed to believe in something more than just zoning codes and real estate forecasts. Reporters crowded around him. "What inspired your design? Do you really think it's realistic?" He answered with cautious optimism. He believed architecture could be justice in bricks and concrete. But behind the smiles, behind the handshake from the mayor, someone else had already drawn a different line, and Jalen was about to cross it. 2 weeks after the win, the excitement faded into static. City officials who once replied within hours now responded with, "We'll get back to you." Meetings were postponed, then rescheduled, then canceled entirely. The building permits? Still under review. Funding? Stuck in committee. Environmental assessments? Delayed due to backlog. Jalen had walked in expecting red tape. But this wasn't tape. It was a wall. Paper thin, but impenetrable. He started hearing phrases like, "It's too ambitious for that area." "Market value doesn't justify it." Maybe scale it down. The same people who had cheered at the announcement were now gently suggesting revisions, ones that erased the soul of the project. It wasn't just bureaucracy. It was architecture weaponized against the poor, against people who looked like him. But Jalen wasn't folding. Not yet. When the invitation came, it looked friendly. A lunch meeting with Councilman Brower, one of the city's gatekeepers, known for steering projects with a velvet grip. The restaurant was upscale, not Jalen's scene. He wore his one good blazer, brought his updated portfolio. But Brower didn't want to see plans. He wanted to talk reality. "You're talented, Jalen," he said, slicing into a medium-rare steak. "But you've got to understand the economics. The city can't afford a project that doesn't serve the broader tax base," Jalen replied, calm but firm. "You mean it doesn't serve rich people?" Brower smiled, a knowing, slow smile. "Call it what you like, but let's be honest. South End isn't ready for this kind of change." That line echoed in Jalen's head. Not ready. Like the people he grew up with were too broken to deserve beauty. When the check came, Brower paid it with a nod. "You'll get further if you learn how to color inside the lines." But Jalen wasn't born to color. He was born to draw new lines. Jalen began digging. In the archives of the planning department, he found familiar patterns. 5 years ago, another project, South Garden Homes, had been greenlit for the same area. Same promises, affordable housing, green spaces, community-led design. But it never broke ground. Instead, it quietly vanished, swallowed by amendments, policy shifts, and budget reallocations. The paper trail ended with a consulting firm linked to a former deputy mayor, and a luxury condo project now stood where the South Gardens were meant to rise. Another ghost project, another dream buried under spreadsheets and silence. Jalen printed everything he found. He circled names, dates, approvals. each page proof that his project wasn't just stalling, it was being suffocated. And he realized this wasn't neglect. It was preservation of an invisible boundary between their city and his. Jalen returned to South End, to the church basement where he'd held his first design workshop. The same folding chairs, the same leaking ceiling. But now the room was full. Mothers, grandfathers, teens, all waiting to hear what was happening to the project they believed in. He spoke carefully, honestly. "They're stalling us, hoping we give up. But I won't. And I need you not to either." A woman in the back stood up. Miss Geraldine, 82 years old, sharp as ever. "They always do this," she said. "Promise us new bricks, then disappear with the money." Jalen nodded. "This time, we document everything. We stay loud. We stay seen." Someone began recording with their phone, then another, and another. That night, a video clip went viral. A young black architect promising his neighborhood they wouldn't be erased again. The line was no longer just his. The community was holding the pencil too. Pressure works in strange ways. 2 weeks after the meeting, a whistleblower leaked internal emails. Jalen received them anonymously. Subject lines like, "Delay strategy for Unity Row," "Diverting funds to Madison Commons," and a name kept appearing, Councilman Brower. Jalen filed a public complaint, demanded an independent audit. Local press picked it up. What started as a development delay was turning into a scandal. Brower went silent. The city called it a miscommunication. And just like that, building permits were suddenly found. Environmental reports were approved. But the damage had already been done. Not to Jalen, to the illusion of neutrality in development. He had pulled back the curtain, and behind it wasn't chaos. It was order, designed to keep the wrong people out of the right neighborhoods. With permits in hand and press at his back, Jalen thought the hardest part was over. But then came the budget cuts. Unforeseen city shortfall, they claimed. Every project took a hit, except the high-rise downtown, except the new stadium, except the luxury riverfront promenade. Unity Row's funding was slashed by 38%. Jalen revised, trimmed, reimagined. But he refused to strip the heart from the design. No fewer units, no cutting the green spaces, no concrete boxes. He pitched a partnership with a local nonprofit, crowdfunded small grants, applied for every urban renewal fund he could find. For every dollar the city withheld, he found 50 cents somewhere else. It wasn't sustainable, it wasn't fair, but it was possible. He printed his revised designs in red ink, not to show anger, but to mark every compromise that wasn't his choice. As ground broke at Unity Row, so did tensions. A neighboring district, wealthier, whiter, filed a formal complaint. Noise, traffic, decreased property values. Their councilwoman used coded language on local radio, changing character of the area, preserving our community standards. The next week, someone erected a chain-link fence along the invisible border between South End and the adjacent district. It wasn't city-sanctioned, no permits, no signatures, but it stayed up, and no one took responsibility. Jalen visited the site at dusk. The fence shimmered in orange light. On his side, kids watching through the mesh. On the other, silence and sprinklers. He touched the metal. Cold, temporary, but symbolic. This was the line they didn't want crossed. Not by concrete, not by culture, not by hope. The first bricks went in during a spring morning. Families gathered. Kids pressed their hands into wet cement, giggling. The pastor blessed the ground. A jazz trio played over the hum of the construction trucks. Jalen stood quietly, watching. This was not the building he'd first imagined, but it was still dignity in form. Reporters asked, "What's next?" He answered, "We build more, and we build together." But the real answer was deeper. What's next is remembering. Documenting every closed door, every lie, every boundary drawn in secret. Because red lines don't only exist on zoning maps. They exist in minds, in contracts, in silences, but they can be redrawn. 2 years later, Unity Row stood complete. Children played in green courtyards, murals stretched across walls, painted by residents. The community center buzzed day and night. A college student wrote her thesis on the project. Red lines, the architecture of quiet resistance. Jalen kept working, not for awards, not for press, but because every block, every blueprint, every brick was a way of saying, "We belong." He passed by the old fence one evening. It was gone, replaced by a garden planted on both sides. No ribbon cutting, no headlines, just the quiet collapse of a wall that should never have stood.